I am so excited for this one. We are constantly trying to figure out why people give, right? And connect with them in a way that's meaningful. For this session, we have done some research on the actual science behind why people might be inspired to give. So we are unlocking the secrets of the donor brain with neuroscience. And get us started, I'm going to hand it over to Jake.
All right. Just as a way to kind of preface this, obviously psychology is the study of the human brain. That's kind of the first half. But if you look up the specifics about it, it is mostly with respect to behavior. So, there's different versions of neuroscience that we look at, like, oh, there's the actual studying of the tissues at the cellular level. That's interesting to some people and not to probably everyone here. So what we are really looking at is like, what is the behavioral causes of things? So looking at understanding psychology is by far our best tool to predict behavior before it happens. Humans are nothing if very, very predictable. So there's a lot that we can look to in neuroscience and in psychology to know exactly how people are going to behave before they do. And then that allows us to make more optimized decisions throughout our I guess, context that we use it no matter what. I was going to say, within fundraising, but it could be anything really. It could be marketing. It could be the way that you interface with the people in your volunteers and your boards and everything else. So it really is expansive. We're kind of going to zero in on fundraising specifically this time, just because that's, what we tend to talk about, obviously. But knowing that these tips and tricks and tools and things that we've got kind of apply to anything. And we're going to kind of walk you through specifically how we can have these different phenomenons in psychology. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. I'll show you which main 5, these are kind of our top 5 psychology database approaches to philanthropy. These are like phenomenons that exist outside of philanthropy, but we feel fit really well within the context of philanthropy. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through each of them one at a time. Feel free to drop questions in the chat. We'll have some questions for you as well that you can kind of interact with us. We've tried to do the unmute thing in the past, and we can certainly, if you have a longer question, you can raise your hand on mute, but we found with bigger groups, it's easier to use that chat feature. Just kind of keeps everything flowing pretty quick. So starting off, we're going to start off with the feel-good factor. The feel-good factor. There we go. So we know that giving of any kind, this is not necessarily philanthropy specific context giving, but giving to others triggers the release of 2 things, oxytocin and dopamine. These are 2 separate chemicals. They often are interchanged in sort of the colloquial context. They get used interchangeably. That is not correct. The main differentiation, that if you want to just know just the basics of it, is oxytocin is the pleasure chemical. So we're looking at things like you would get that from running. If you go and exercise and you feel kind of a little bit better afterwards, or you go to a workout class or something. The serotonin is also kind of mixed in there, but you get oxytocin specifically, and then dopamine, which is often thought about as the pleasure hormone. It's actually the motivation. So you're not actually getting joy. You're not actually feeling joy out of dopamine. It's just re-triggering you to do the thing again. It's why like social media scrolling is really addictive. It's not because you're feeling a lot of joy as you're flipping through TikTok or Instagram, but you're getting these crazy dopamine hits. So your brain is telling you, do that again, do that again. It's like if you were to eat something sweet, 10,000 years ago, that would be good calories. It would keep you alive longer. So your brain learned to reinforce that behavior. So it's motivating and it wants you to do that again. So we know that giving makes you feel good. And then separately, different chemical process, it makes you want to do that thing again. So what this does is enhances happiness, trust, social bonding, and this kind of emotional and connective part of fundraising, the non-transactional part of it, increase the likelihood of donations over time. So we know that if we are thinking about fundraising as transactional and kind of churn and burn and mass marketing, we're not going to get the repeat donors that we would get otherwise if we make it a more human and more emotional connection. We try to optimize all the time of like, how many times we have to interact with a donor? Do we send them this kind of thing? What are the exact things that we say in our letters to make sure they give again? How often do we ask them? Maybe AI can help us with those things. But for the most part, if we kind of steer away from that whole system and steer towards what can we do to foster relationships, we know that's going to be a lot more effective in getting those repeat donors. People give to people. A lot of times people make their philanthropic decisions based on just who else feels like that charity is a worthwhile one. You know, you may know nothing about the charity, but if a close peer or someone you trust endorses it, you say, hey, if you vetted it, I trust you. And if you feel like their cause is an important one, I'll hear them out at a minimum. So we know that people give to people first, and that stories are powerful. You know, we talk a lot about, you know, impact reports and data, and we love data. I particularly love data. But one story about one person that you've helped is far more powerful than a whole sheet, a whole fact sheet of all the different impact. To say, oh, we've helped 5,000 people or 5,000 families this year. Like, not only do I not know 5,000 people, I don't even like 5,000 people. I can't picture that. But tell me one story about one person that you've helped. And that's when I want to be able to get out my checkbook. That's what makes me excited. And that's the case for most of us. So what we can kind of learn from this is that giving donors opportunities to connect both with each other and the mission directly is kind of an unstoppable reinforcement tool. Again, going back to this dopamine thing, again, it's not about pleasure in the moment. It's about your brain being trained. I liked that. I want to seek that again. I want you to do that again. I want you to eat the potato chip again. I want you to scroll on TikTok. Whatever those dopamine habits that you have, we can harness the same psychology to reinforce giving and connecting. But we, as the fundraisers, have to provide opportunity for them to connect with each other. So we don't necessarily love fundraising events, but having events that donors can get together, very, very important. And also get connected to the mission. It's tough when someone just gives money, but then they don't get to take a tour or they don't get to see directly. And a lot of our organizations are healthcare organizations. So there's HIPAA considerations where we can't get them exactly into the patient room to see the stuff. But there's some opportunities that we can create that allow for those things. We just want to get them closer to the mission. We don't even really have to ask them again. We can just kind of have them interface with each other in the mission more, and it kind of naturally reinforces this continual giving where we're not having to recapture these donors. They stay with us. So just, if you can, drop in the chat, what is the best event? This can be fundraising or recognition, but when y'all just get people together, you have each year that allows donors specifically to connect with each other. So just in the chat really quickly, if you got it, optionally drop it in there. Best event, maybe like one sentence, just kind of briefly describing, what do you do to set up and foster where donors can connect with each other where they wouldn't normally be able to interface together? We'll read through some of these. Give you just a minute. All right, bonfire and VIP room during our educational meetings. That's awesome. Faye, while everyone's kind of typing, do you want to give us like two quick sentence speaking on what that looks and feels like?
The VIP room was something that we decided to launch this year. So we put smart, wonderful people in the room, mainly my staff, and then a big QR code with a big sign right outside of our educational meetings that says GFA donor VIP room for continuous coffee and snacks. And you got something on your badge if you are like qualified, depending on your level of giving. And we actually did have one doctor who's a delight, and she's a younger member, but we know she's a committed donor, not necessarily at a higher level, but a consistent level, which we all know sometimes is more important even than the higher donor. And she walked in with her QR code scanned on her phone, and she said, I think I just spent $500 for hot water so I can have tea. She wasn't wrong necessarily,
No.
but she laughed about it and went back into the room and brought more people in. So it was absolutely worthwhile. Thank you.
Very cool. Awesome. Andrea, if you're comfortable sharing a couple of sentences about what y'all do, but again, don't feel pressure if you don't want to speak up today.
Oh, no problem. We have what's called the Believe Bash, which is our gala, and we support. It's in support of a children's hospital. So it's a dress-up affair where you get to come and look really nice. We have great themed events. Last year was the old Hollywood, the Golden Age. So people dressed up, and we had. It was a lot of fun for people to give, and there's an auction, of course. But then for younger up and coming donors, we had a whiskey and chocolate pairing at an event hall that brought in young, 30 somethings basically with young families. And it went over really, really well. They had different colored badges, and you were to connect with someone who had on a badge your same color. We were given Lego pieces, and they did an activity where you had to use your Lego pieces to create something together with people in your group. So it worked out really well and raised a nice bit of money for people at their giving level.
So you're intentionally scheduling activities where forcing them to interact with people they never have before. That's brilliant. I love that. I'll do one more just sake of time. I know we got some more in the chat here. Cindy, a couple of words about Jingle with the Jellies, just because I love the name of it.
Yeah. Jingle with the Jellies is it's a fundraiser that we do where donors or sponsors can sponsor Christmas trees that they decorate. We usually have close to 50 at our aquarium here, the North Carolina Aquarium. And then to recognize those sponsors, we have a Jingle with the Jellies, which is after hours at night, to thank those sponsors for, decorating a tree. We usually have a scuba diving Santa and a scuba diving elf. And some of the donors bring their children, even though we discourage it because there's alcohol, but they do. And it just ends up being a really fun event. And everybody there knows that they are donors because it's not a ticketed event. So it
Gotcha.
is,
So donors only.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, y'all are way more creative than me. That's awesome. I'm going to read the last couple of things here. Yeah, awards dinner, always great to recognize people in front of their peers. People love being recognized in front of their peers. And then legacy lunches where they get to meet the actual person that was the recipient. Super cool. Again, all about connecting people to people. Again, throwing fundraising events, fine. You're going to make 50 cents on the dollar. The more important metric out of that is what did you get from a prospecting perspective or what did you get from a connection cultivation perspective? So love that. All right, next one. All right, the power of empathy seems obvious, but we're going to talk through kind of the actual science behind it. So mirror neurons, if you're not familiar, are the specialized brain cells, actually parts of your brain, that activate when we observe others' actions and emotions. We know these exist because we can put people in an MRI and show them pictures of other people or humans, and there's specific parts of the brains that light up in those scans, and we can identify correctly, hey, these are the ones that actually light up when we're looking at other humans and observing their behavior, actions, and it drives empathy. And the empathy kind of pushes us again. We survive better in packs than we do as solo animals. So, tens of thousands of years ago, it was very advantageous to be accepted in the group. Best way to do that is to kind of observe the needs of others and try to be a part and contribute. We have this need to connect, this need to be with others. And we can harness this need by sharing stories and visuals of those that we've helped to evoke empathy within people. Again, going back to story, and going back to visuals, this is a great for photos, for video content, but empathetic connections motivate donations directly. We say, oh, we got to pull at the heartstrings. That's exactly what this is. We kind of know this inherently, like, oh yeah, of course we got to pull at the heartstrings, but there's actually science data behind this that talks about this is why pulling at the heartstrings is more effective. The simplest way to kind of talk about this is you want to get people out of the left brain into the right brain, out of the logic and into the emotions. I know that's not medically correct, but for the sake of the argument, the left brain into the right brain. No one makes a financial decision that results in them having less money in a logical way. There's no logic. And even people who give away money for tax purposes, you can't give away money and end up with more money in any case. You can reduce your tax burden, but you don't give away money to get rid of your tax burden entirely. You're not going to make money by giving it away. So we can't have people in this logical side of their brain. We got to push them to the other side of their brain where they're thinking about empathy. So people can only have empathy if they're given opportunity and space to connect to the mission directly. So we talked a little bit about connecting with each other in the last phenomenon. This one's a little bit more about connecting to the mission, specifically the work you're doing, showing the outcomes, talking about a specific story, incredibly powerful. So back to the chat here. How do you create opportunity for empathy with your donor base? What ideas have worked for you? Again, this is not necessarily them connecting with each other. How do you get your donors to interface with your mission directly? Give people a couple minutes to think if you want to share. And if we don't have anyone, if anyone from the Pride team wants to speak up on an example too, we can do that, or we can move on. Up to y'all. All right, from Marty and from Jenna, seek their why. Why do they volunteer? Why do they give? Love this one. A lot of times what we'll do to start our committee meetings or board meetings is have everyone share their why they joined, kind of go around in a circle and have everyone start with that. It gets us right into the empathy, right into the excitement of the mission, and you don't have to take them to the specific area where you do the work. Really, really powerful way to do that. And Marty is saying stories about real people who have benefited from your care and service. A lot of our clients do what's called a mission moment. So again, all their committee meetings, all of their board meetings, they usually will do it close to the end of the agenda, where they will share one story about one person or one thing or one entity that they've helped. So they go through all their business, and to kind of leave everyone on that kind of happy, feel-good empathy note. Hey, I want to tell you a really cool thing that all of y'all's work has resulted in. And they go through and they tell a story. If they have to omit some of the names and specific contact details, they do that, but really cool to continually do that. This is not a one-off thing. We want to continually connect people to the mission. And then Andrea, videos of patient stories, incredibly powerful. Also a big fan of video and what we can do with that now. It's easier and easier to produce professional quality videos these days, even with your iPhone. I would say just putting your iPhone on like the max settings and recording someone gets you 80% of what a multi-$1,000, cinema camera can get you anymore. We're that close with just what we have in our pocket. So it really doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a professional lighting crew and film crew to get with all the new AI stuff that's in the iPhone that allows it to process video. The ability to share video is easier than ever before. Awesome stuff. And then Cindy, we highlighted the mother of a team member for our end of year appeal. We cared for her, shared her famous cookie recipe, love that, and enclosed a copy of the recipe. How cool is that? That's such a neat idea. Yeah, but Cindy, was that your idea, or did someone else come up with that?
Well, it was kind of mine and kind of not. We had done this appeal years ago, but it was during Mother's Day with another coworker, and we had just put in a pecan pie recipe. But this has been like 10 years before, and I said, I think we should resurrect that and do it for Christmas, and it did really well.
Fantastic. Pecans are from the South. Pecans are from everywhere else.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, don't be sorry. I say pecan as well. I've lived in Tennessee long enough now that I'm allowed to. I got my permission slip for that. Wonderful. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Jenna for our next phenomenon.
Good morning, everybody. Grab your coffee, grab your popcorn, hop on the bandwagon with me, okay? And we're going to talk about this in the most positive sense, right? We're not bandwagon fans. We're not going on board just because it's cool, but that's kind of the science behind it. I did fall down a very interesting sciencey rabbit hole reading some of the background on this. There are some really cool studies on, lightning bugs and mama turkeys and the way that they've been conditioned to care for their young by hearing this very particular cheep, cheep sound, right? But I'm going to distill it down to you by talking about social media. I think probably to Jake's point earlier, every single one of us follows some influencers, right? We scroll through YouTube, they tell us what we need to buy on Amazon. And that is the reason that there were literal stampedes at Target stores in December because they had released the hot Stanley Cup colors, right? We had to get on the bandwagon. If you got the pink set, I want to talk to you about where you found it. Look, showcasing your supporter numbers, talking about testimonials, the why someone gave to your organization. Those are all things that are going to help spread that social influence. When we talk about our major gift campaigns, when we talk about our top signature donors, we encourage you to start in the silent phase. That's because we want to go big, we want to go bold, and we want to make our biggest, bravest asks up front and bring them in like behind the scenes, right? So they can provide some influence so that the influencers feel even more powerful and connected to the mission and the work that they're helping fund. And then they're going to go out and tell their story within their networks, right? I want you to think about how you can leverage the influence of those most well-known people within your region, within your philanthropic causes, right? Within your giving circles. Who are the people that are the movers and shakers in town? How can you use their social influence to further the causes of your organization? Can anybody talk about some ways that you've done this, or even challenges that you've run into in trying to connect those society movers and shakers?
Jenna, may I ask a question to you and or the crowd as they answer?
Yeah.
The influence of social proof and the bandwagon appeal, I'd be really interested if anyone has segmented it by age, race, religion, part of town, anything that someone is doing differently instead of just throwing up a bunch of names on the website and saying, here's our top donors. Or is anyone now thinking younger women, again, younger women, here's 5 women who've committed to us, please join. I'd love to hear about segmentation, because that's something we haven't done, but it's all about, it's our 2024, part of our new strategic plan for 2024 and onwards.
I absolutely love that. And I think Jake touched on it earlier with segmentation and marketing tactics, right? It's a good question, Faye, because when we hear these tips, often we talk about the major gifts, the signature gifts, the biggest opportunities to move your organization forward, but you can apply these at every level in your donor pipeline, right? In your gift pyramid. So think about how you can target specific groups of influencers, especially when you're trying to move them from like annual to mid-level up to major. How do you make those connections? The women's giving circles, I think, is a really good example of that. Who's within your network? How can we all work toward this common cause? And I think that it has to be a genuine conversation first. There has to be a real, true, genuine connection. Are you working with perhaps a mom of a client who's used your services? Are you working with a patient family and they know other patient families? How within each of those pockets and segments, there's definitely some targeted messaging and some targeted maybe AI influence that's going to help you speak directly to them in a more streamlined, quick fashion. Jake, Marty, gang, what thoughts do you have?
Yeah, totally agree. The biggest 2 demographic segmenters are age and socioeconomic class. So you listed several there. The ones that are the easiest because people naturally kind of group themselves already. People are mostly going to interface with people around their same income and mostly around their same age. That is super blanket. Obviously, that is not always the case. But if you wanted to group somehow, like we have to put people in some kind of boxes, those are the easiest ones to start in terms of influence. Like I am more likely to buy something on Amazon from an influencer who is a male in his 30s because I'm like, oh, he must know. You know, I don't even know why I do it. I just feel like I trust him more. There's no reason. But we're all this way. And this is why, you know, influencers have kind of a following that's a lot like them a lot of the time.
It's why we do encourage that, you know, when you're working on your committee recruiting and you're looking at your structure for volunteer groups, you have to pull from different pockets of your community, right? You don't just want, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, you don't just want white men on your team, right? You don't just want women on your team. You need to touch all of those sectors and segments of your funding community. All right, anybody have questions or other suggestions where you've leveraged the influence of social proof? I will say
examples in the chat.
This can be a challenge too, right? Because sometimes those influencers in our community don't have a heart for the service. They don't have a heart for the mission. They have a heart for being an influencer or being well known in the community. So I think we have to balance our time that we spend on finding those people. And that's where the volunteers and your support team really comes into. All right. So one last thing I'll say on this, you know, along the lines of the Stanley Cups or some of these trendy hot items everybody had to buy for Christmas, right? Oftentimes, we as consumers, we as donors see expensive as good, right? That's old-fashioned. It's a stereotype. It's a marketing trick in a lot of cases. Is the new Stanley Cup any better than my vintage thermos from Stanley? No. Is it better than the Yeti I bought 4 years ago? Probably not. But it's new and it's expensive. And that means it's really good. This kind of plays into our next slide. If you want to go on. Thank you, Trish. The art of scarcity. So when we are structuring our gift naming opportunities, when we are looking at giving societies, when we are talking about timelines for public campaign phases or crowdfunding even, right? Let's think big gifts, annual fund, all the ranges. Perceived scarcity is going to make us act faster. If it's a real deadline, we were meeting with a client recently that was talking about, do they launch a new campaign? Do they extend their goal? We didn't want them to like bait and switch their community and their volunteer leadership. We wanted them to be honest. The needs have changed. The needs have increased, right? This idea of scarcity, though, and here's a brief trigger warning. Let's all take a little ride back to like early COVID days. Let's think about this one woman who walked into one grocery store in one town somewhere in America and saw that the shelves were out of toilet paper. It landed on social media, and within hours, every single one of us was rushing to the store to stock up on toilet paper. Did we need toilet paper? Maybe. Might we need toilet paper in a week? Might there not be enough for all of us to have a mini hoard during COVID days? There was a scarce supply, or there was a belief that there was a scarcity, and we rushed out to get that product, right? So if expensive equals good, what does expensive and exclusive equal? That's gotta be great, right? So as a high wealth donor, I want the most exclusive experience, trip, opportunity. I want to be able to come into your organization and see something that I don't have access to in my normal day-to-day wealthy donor life, right? How can we make things more unique, more interesting, more scarce and special and great for our prospects, our donors, and even our clients? What is one of your scarcest resources or recognition opportunities that you provide either to your clients, to your donors? What are those sort of high tier touch points that you have within your donor crowd? Does anybody have an example of that? So I will share one just briefly. And as Jake touched on earlier, we don't often encourage event fundraising because it is a lot of work. It is a lot of heavy lift and expense up front. But if you're looking at a silent auction, for example, if I am a 6-7 figure donor, I probably am not going to get excited about bidding on the re-gifted Sonicare toothbrush that someone donated to your silent auction, right? I can buy my own toothbrush. I can probably buy like a better quality toothbrush because I can give 7 figures just very easily, right? What's exclusive to me? An invitation to a roundtable with a CEO. That's a good example. Who has FaceTime with the college president, the hospital chairman? Who gets to see that really exciting new research doctor that's just joined your practice, right? Those sort of intimate, unique, scarce opportunities are where you can really push the dollars forward. The last thing I'll say on this right now, as a nonprofit, if you have not increased your gala prices since COVID, if you have not raised your naming levels in the last 3 years, the window of opportunity to do that in this market is closing. Take advantage of inflation. Every company you shop with, every vendor you use is doing it. You guys and your services are worth it too. Okay. So consider your price points on fundraisers, be aggressive. Everybody is savvy and knows what's going on in the market right now, and they're seeing prices soar. It's not going to sticker shock and scare them away.
All right, Marty.
All right. Thanks, Jenna. Definitely last but not least on this one, I would say I heard every single slide that we just covered on, I heard the word trust mentioned once or twice, right? I know that trust is so foundational to everything that we do, right? We constantly say people give to people, and I always love to say who they know and trust, right? Because we are going to be inspired to action if we trust what we see and what we hear. We're not going to jump on the bandwagon if it's something we don't trust. If we open an email from something and we say, this looks AI generated, we don't trust it, we delete it, right? So it is so important to establish trust, because trust influences people's decisions to give and to act. When I was doing my research on this one, I was like, like, let's break down trust for a minute. And I found something that I really liked, that is like the 4 pillars of trust: honesty, competency, reliability, and relatability. How Jake said he relates to the social media that he follows, the influencer, right? Like, he trusts immediately because there was that relatability, right? Reliability. If we're continually communicating with our people, we're building trust. If we're showing competency in what we're doing because we have transparency in our act together, we are building trust. If we are honest and say this has changed and we own things that they move, people are more likely to trust, right? So trust is just key in decision making. A donor is more likely to give to an organization or a person that they trust than a cause that they care about. I might be super passionate about animals, but if there's something that comes across that I don't know anything about from, a foreign country asking me for money to save the animals, am I going to be inspired? I'm going to be a lot more inspired by the local humane society where I know the people there, and it might be exactly the same cause, right? But I'm going to be more likely to give to the one that I trust. So transparency about our goals, our methods, our impact, that's going to build trust, right? We want to communicate on a consistent basis. If they hear from us once a year, they're not going to remember that they trusted us and they had that emotional connection when that time comes. So we've got to have that consistency, so we're building that reliability and they know we're there. They know they can always reach out to us if they need anything. Additionally, partnerships with reputable entities are going to enhance that credibility and support. It's important who you partner and align with, right? Because that is going to give someone a perception about you if they don't already have established trust, right? If they don't trust and know you already, they're going to look, who do you associate with? Guilt by association. I remember as a kid, my parents would be like, I don't care. I mean, I care. I care if you're making good choices, but if you're hanging around with people who are making bad choices, you just made a bad choice, and guilt by association, right? So same thing goes with this. We want to partner and align with entities that also have trust built, that helps us raise our level of trust. And again, this, I think, just all goes back to something that is so foundational to everything that we preach in fundraising, the importance of volunteers, right? We know that we can connect with people who trust people who trust us, and that we can get those second and third layers of connection a lot more quickly, right? Building trust takes time. But if we build trust with a core group of volunteers who already have established trust with others, that's how we can really move the needle and make sure that we're inspiring giving and make it so meaningful and transformational. So just drop it in the chat. What are you doing intentionally to foster donor trust? It can be on a daily, weekly, monthly, annual basis. What are we doing? There's got to be some things we're doing with intentionality that build trust. Follow up when and how we say we will, right? If I say I'm going to call you next week and I don't call you, do you trust that I'm going to do it again? You don't, right? We've got to do that. Quarterly impact reports. That is, you have come to expect and know. And if I say it's going to be quarterly and it happens once a year, do you trust me that those are coming out? Monthly newsletters. If we're having these consistent things, we need to keep them. Now, does that mean you miss a month, you get back to it? Hey, everybody has things that come up, but consistency, that's important. Transparency about challenges with your key stakeholders and asking for their advice, their input, that's going to engage them on a much deeper level, right? These are all fabulous. I mean, any others? Y'all are really, really tapping into something that's so important here. All right. Well, I think we are pushing right up against time. So I will entertain any final questions, comments for the good of the order here today. I'll just draw your attention to the next slide here. Again, we dug deep on a lot of this research. Here's the academic sources that we used. If you're interested, feel free to dig deeper yourself, but we really tried to pull out what we thought was the best of the best in this neuroscience space to apply to you and your philanthropy efforts. And I hope you enjoyed this session today. Thanks everyone for your willingness to contribute and be engaged.